She wasn't supposed to mean anything to him. Just a quiet old lady at the end of the street, in a house that looked like it hadn't been painted since the year she was born. But the day Liam saw her sitting alone on her porch, struggling to lift a bag of garden soil, something shifted. He had no idea that moment, just a second of hesitation before walking over, would become the beginning of the only family he had ever truly known. Liam wasn't from the kind of family that showed up for each other. He was 17, gay, and had learned quickly how to fold his hopes into silence. His mother worked 2 jobs and barely spoke at dinner. His father gone years ago, without a funeral or even a final fight. Their house echoed with absence, and Liam had mastered the art of being invisible in his own home. Mrs. Eleanor Jameson, on the other hand, was hard to ignore. Not because she was loud or nosy, she was quiet, with a gentle presence that wrapped around you like a memory. She always wore thick glasses and pinned her silver hair into a bun, as if expecting guests who never came. Liam remembered passing by her porch one afternoon and hearing old jazz crackle through a dusty radio. It sounded like a song from a movie, from a world where love wasn't complicated. When he first offered to help her with the garden, she'd laughed softly and called him Daniel. It wasn't his name, but she smiled like she meant it. He corrected her, but she waved him off and said something strange. "You remind me of someone I never really got to know." He didn't ask questions. She didn't explain, but he kept coming back. After school, after shifts at the grocery store, he'd walk over with his sleeves rolled up, ready to pull weeds or fix whatever the rain had loosened. In return, she offered lemonade and stories that didn't ask for anything in return. Stories of dances in barns and telegrams that never came. She told him about her husband, who went to war and never came home, and about the child she raised mostly alone until even that child left. Weeks passed. Liam didn't notice how easily her porch had started to feel more like home than his own kitchen. He never told her about the slurs he heard in the school hallway. He never mentioned the time his mother found the LGBTQ+ pin in his drawer and threw it in the trash without a word. But somehow Mrs. Jameson already knew. She began calling him my boy without hesitation. He never corrected her again. Then came the phone call. The hospice nurse. The words Liam never wanted to hear. She passed peacefully in her sleep last night. He stood on her porch for what felt like hours, staring at the cracked welcome mat, the empty flower pots, the faint echo of her laugh. The world had kept moving, but something inside him had frozen. A week later, the letter arrived, handwritten in her looping, careful cursive. A letter addressed not to Liam, but simply to my grandson. In it, she wrote, "You gave me back my last spring. In you, I saw the love I had once lost, the kind that doesn't ask to be earned. This house is yours now. It's not much, but it's filled with memories that need someone kind to protect them. You gave me something to believe in again. I hope it gives you the same." Liam pressed the letter to his chest and cried, not because he felt alone, but because, for the first time in his life, he didn't. But what he didn't know was that someone else had received a letter too, and that person was not going to let the past stay buried. If you believe family isn't always about blood, but about the ones who show up when it matters, don't forget to subscribe to Heart Stories. The next chapter will remind you that the people who save us aren't always the ones we expect. The funeral was quiet. A small group gathered beneath a gray sky, surrounded by fading chrysanthemums in the scent of wet grass. Liam stood near the headstone, hands folded, the brass key to her house heavy in his pocket. The wind tugged at the corners of his jacket as the pastor read softly from a small book. Most of those present were neighbors or old church friends, people who remembered Eleanor from a distance, not from the stories she told or the tea shared in the garden. He brought a single rose, laid it down gently. He had no last words prepared, but the silence between heartbeats seemed to hold everything he wished he'd said. And then, the silence cracked. A car door slammed. Boots stepped onto gravel. A man in a black suit walked toward the gathering, not hurrying but not hesitating either. His presence cut through the stillness like glass. He looked to be in his mid-20s, tall, clean-cut, confident in a way that felt learned. Liam didn't recognize him. The stranger stepped beside the headstone and looked down for a moment before turning to the group. He didn't apologize for the interruption. Instead, he cleared his throat and said, "I'm Zachary. Eleanor Jameson was my grandmother." Gasps didn't follow, only murmurs. Someone asked, "Her real grandson?" And Liam felt something tighten in his stomach. Zachary's voice didn't shake. "She and my mother had a falling out before I was born. They hadn't spoken in decades. I only found out she passed 2 days ago, when a legal notice about her estate was forwarded to me. I came to pay my respects and to understand what happened." Liam didn't move. He didn't speak, but his chest burned. After the ceremony, people drifted off. Some offered Zachary polite nods. Others avoided him altogether. Liam stayed behind, arms crossed, unsure if he should leave or confront the man who had just claimed a part of Eleanor that felt like it belonged to him alone. But Zachary approached first. "You must be Liam." The way he said it, flat, deliberate, felt more like an accusation than a greeting. "I was told," Zachary continued, "that my grandmother left everything to you. The house, the land, even the contents inside." Liam blinked, unsure whether to nod or deny it. He didn't know what to say to someone who had never known her voice, her stories, her warmth. Someone who had shown up only now, when she was gone. "She never even tried to contact me," Zachary said. "But she had time to call you her grandson." The words stung, not because they were unfair, but because they were too easy to believe. Liam had wondered the same thing, silently, in the days after her death. Had she ever tried to reach out to her real family? Had he unknowingly filled a gap she wished someone else had? Still, he answered with quiet resolve. "She didn't owe you the memories we shared. I didn't ask for the house. I didn't ask for her love, but I gave her mine." Zachary's jaw clenched. Maybe she was confused. Or maybe she was just lonely. He turned to leave, but paused. "I'll be talking to my lawyer. We'll see what's legal and what's sentimental." The sentence dropped like a stone into water. Liam stood frozen, the old pain of being unwanted crashing against a new wave of being questioned. That night, he sat on Eleanor's porch, the wooden boards creaking beneath him. The garden lay still. He held the letter she'd written him and read it again, slower this time, as if her words might anchor him against the storm ahead. But the real storm hadn't even begun, because Zachary wasn't finished. And the house wasn't just walls and windows, it was the keeper of secrets neither of them were ready for. It was a Tuesday when Zachary came back, not with a lawyer, but with a request. "I just want to see the house," he said. "One last time, before things get messy." Liam hesitated. The letter was still on the table, the brass key always in his pocket. He had every right to say no, ostimo, but instead, he opened the door. They walked through the front hall in silence. Dust still clung to the corners where sunlight didn't reach. The photos on the mantel remained untouched. Eleanor's favorite scarf hung on the chair where she used to knit. Her absence filled the house like perfume after someone has left the room faint. But everywhere, Zachary didn't touch anything. He stood in the living room and looked around like he was measuring a memory that never existed. Then his eyes landed on the attic door, half hidden above the narrow stairs. "Has it been opened?" Liam shook his head. "Not since she passed. I didn't want to disturb anything." Zachary gave a short nod, then pulled down the old wooden ladder. The hinges groaned like they hadn't been moved in years. Liam followed him up, the dust thick enough to dull sound. The attic was cramped and dim, filled with boxes stacked like forgotten decades. Zachary walked slowly, eyes scanning as if looking for proof of something or someone. Then he stopped beside a small cedar chest tucked behind a rocking chair. It was locked. Liam pulled the brass key from his pocket. Something told him it would fit, and it did. Inside, there were letters, dozens, some unopened, others yellowed by time. Beneath them, a photo album, and at the bottom, a faded journal, tied with a navy blue ribbon. Zachary picked up a letter. The handwriting was unmistakable. "That's my mother's name," he said, his voice caught between anger and disbelief. "She must have written these before I was born." Liam opened the journal instead. The first page began with a date nearly 3 decades ago. The ink had bled slightly, as if the pages had wept. "I failed my daughter today. I told her that I couldn't accept what she was doing to that boy, my grandson. She wants to correct him, to force him into something he's not. I begged her to let him be. She slammed the door and told me never to come back." Zachary's hands shook as he'd unfolded one of the unopened letters. His mother's name signed in cursive. Inside, a photo of a little boy blowing bubbles in a garden. On the back, in faded ink, Zachary, age 5. He looked so much like Eleanor. He didn't speak. He sat down, slowly, as if the floor had given way beneath him. "She never stopped thinking about you," Liam said, barely more than a whisper. "She tried to reach you." Zachary nodded, eyes still locked on the photo. "My mom used to say my grandmother hated her, that she didn't care what happened to us." "She did," Liam replied. "She just didn't know how to fix what was broken." The attic grew still again. But it wasn't the silence of strangers anymore. It was the silence that comes when truth fills in the empty spaces left by years of misunderstanding. 2 men, 1 house, one story neither of them fully knew until now. They didn't speak much on the way down from the attic. The stairs creaked beneath their weight, but neither of them noticed. The house felt different now, less like a battleground, more like a museum of choices neither of them had made, but both had inherited. Zachary sat at the kitchen table while Liam boiled water for tea, like Eleanor used to. Neither of them reached for the sugar dish she'd always insisted was just for guests. They weren't guests anymore. They were the remnants of a fractured bloodline, 2 branches that had grown in opposite directions, now tangled together by accident or something more. It was Zachary who broke the silence. "My mom used to pray over me when I was sleeping, whisper things, asking God to fix me." He didn't look at Liam, just stared at the faded floral wallpaper, as if it might answer him. "She said if I told anyone, I'd ruin our family, that people like me never live happy lives. So I stayed quiet. I got really good at hiding." Liam nodded slowly. "Same, only I didn't hide well enough." They exchanged a look, not one of sympathy but of recognition. Different lives, same scars. Zachary continued, quieter now. "I didn't even know my mom had a falling out with her mother over me. She always said my grandmother was cruel, judgmental. She never told me why they stopped talking, never mentioned what happened when I was a kid. She just erased her." Liam thought of the journal entries, the letters Eleanor had written but never sent. He thought of the first time she called him my boy and how it made something inside him unclench for the first time in years. "She didn't erase you," Liam said. She kept you here, in everything, even if you never saw it." They sat in silence again, this time not from discomfort, but from something heavier realization. Zachary's fingers tapped lightly on the table. "So what now?" "You keep the house. I walk away." Liam sighed. "It's not about keeping or losing. It's about deciding what we want to do with what she left behind, and what it meant to her." He stood and walked to the hallway, returning with the worn photo album from the attic. He laid it open between them, pages of memories neither of them owned, but both felt connected to. A snapshot of Eleanor dancing in the snow, a handwritten recipe card for her molasses cookies, a newspaper clipping of her husband's name in a World War II casualty list. Then, halfway through the album, an envelope. Inside was a note, not addressed to anyone. "If they ever meet, I hope they don't fight over the house. I hope they see what I saw in both of them. One came from my blood, the other from my heart, but both deserve a place to belong." Liam read it aloud. When he finished, Zachary sat back in his chair and let out a long breath, as if he'd been holding it for years. Maybe, he said softly, this place wasn't meant to be just hers, or just yours. Maybe it's supposed to be ours. It wasn't a surrender, it wasn't a victory, it was the beginning of something unfamiliar and fragile peace. Because sometimes the deepest connection isn't about who shares your last name, but who shares your silence. Who knows your ache without you having to explain it? Who grew up in a different house but fought the same battles inside? And that, perhaps, is what Eleanor had hoped for all along. The garden was the first thing they rebuilt, not the attic, not the leaky roof or the creaky floorboards. It was the garden, Eleanor's old patch of earth, that called to them first. It had once been her sanctuary, the place where she talked to birds, cursed at weeds, and told Liam stories that sounded more like confessions whispered into the wind. Now, two men, once strangers by blood and strangers by life, knelt side by side with dirt beneath their nails, breathing new life into it. They planted lilies, Eleanor's favorite, and lavender, because Liam remembered she said it calmed her hands when they trembled, and a single white rose bush in the back corner, where the morning sun always hit first. Zachary said little, but he showed up. Every morning, he brought tools, seeds, mulch, and slowly the air between them softened. There were no more sharp questions, no more comparisons, just quiet work and something else beginning to grow between them: respect. One morning, Liam poured tea into 2 mugs and said, without fanfare, "I've been thinking about turning this house into something more." Zachary looked up, eyebrow raised. "More than what?" "More than just a memory, more than just a place we fought over." He explained. The idea had come to him in pieces, during nights when he couldn't sleep, during afternoons when he read Eleanor's journal again, during moments when he realized how rare, how powerful it was to find safety in a world that often treated people like him as disposable. A community space, a shelter, a short-term home for LGBTQ+ teens who'd been kicked out, like he had been. A place for youth to stay while they found their footing, surrounded by stories, love, and reminders that chosen family is just as sacred as inherited one. Zachary didn't answer right away. He stared at the tea, then at the rose bush, then back at the porch steps they'd sanded the day before. Finally, he said, "She would have liked that." They filed paperwork. They drafted a plan. They reached out to local organizers, got a modest grant from a nonprofit, even hosted a neighborhood fundraiser where former strangers brought muffins and folding chairs and asked questions like, "What does the T stand for in LGBTQ?" The community showed up, not all at once, not without hesitation, but enough to believe that something real was forming. A month later, the house had a new sign on the gate, the Porch Light Project. Below it, in smaller print, in memory of Eleanor Jameson, who left her light on longer than most. They left the guest room exactly as Eleanor had kept it. They filled the attic with books, bedding, and a bulletin board of local resources. The kitchen still smelled like her molasses cookies, thanks to a recipe card Liam had taped to the fridge. On opening day, 3 teens arrived. 2 had nowhere else to go. 1 had just been kicked out by his uncle. All 3 were greeted not by social workers, but by Liam and Zachary. 2 men who didn't have all the answers but knew what it felt like to be lost, unwanted, and saved by kindness. As night fell, the porch light glowed softly, a symbol that in this house, someone was always waiting. Not for perfection, not for permission, but simply to say, "You are home." Her voice no longer echoed through the hallways, but she was everywhere, in the way the curtains swayed with the breeze, in the porch step that still creaked the same way every morning, in the old teacups no one dared replace. Eleanor Jameson hadn't just left behind a house. She had left behind a quiet revolution, disguised as love. Liam sometimes sat alone on the porch at dusk, watching the sun lower behind the old oak tree she used to call hers. The garden bloomed now with more than flowers. It bloomed with purpose, with voices, with stories whispered in safety. Every wall of that house held laughter again this time, from kids who once thought they'd never smile in their lives. Zachary had changed, too. His guarded tone had softened, his posture relaxed. He no longer referred to the house as hers or yours. It was always ours. He started keeping a notebook of ideas, resources, even small poems. He began mentoring one of the teens, teaching him how to build things, not just fix them. But it wasn't just the two of them who had changed. The house was changing others. Neighbors who once avoided eye contact now left fresh eggs by the gate. A retired teacher volunteered to tutor math. A local bakery donated bread weekly. People didn't ask for labels anymore. They asked for stories, and they listened. One afternoon, as Liam was organizing boxes of donated clothes, he found a sealed envelope he'd somehow missed before. No date, just 3 words on the front, in her familiar cursive, "For my boys." Inside, a short letter. The last one. "You both carry pieces of me, whether by blood or by grace. I know I wasn't always brave. I made mistakes. I let fear silence me when I should have shouted love. But if this house becomes a place where one more boy is not afraid to be soft, to be free, to be exactly who he is, then maybe I've done something right. I leave this world with no more gold, no more titles, only the hope that the family I couldn't keep together in life might still exist in the garden I leave behind." Liam read it aloud, voice thick with emotion. When he finished, Zachary didn't speak. He just stood up, walked to the garden, and laid the letter beneath the rose bush. Then he whispered, "She sees us now." And maybe she did, because healing is rarely loud. Sometimes it arrives in mismatched chairs around a shared dinner table, in a kid's laughter echoing through walls once filled with silence, in the unexpected bond between two young men who could have stayed strangers, but didn't. Eleanor's final gift wasn't the house. It was the chance for two wounded hearts to learn that family isn't about who leaves you in the will, but who stays with you when it's hardest to be seen. That garden will keep growing. So will they. And maybe, just maybe, some other boy cast out by fear, wandering with nowhere to go, will one day knock on that porch door and find the lights still on. Have you ever been loved deeply by someone who didn't have to love you at all? Share your story below, and don't forget to subscribe to Heart Stories, because the family we build may be the one that saves us.